Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to dig into some listener-submitted articles about Lee Harvey Oswald.
Oh, yeah. This should be good.
It seems our listener wants to really explore some of the mysteries surrounding Oswald, specifically his life and actions right before the Kennedy assassination,
Right.
especially things that challenge the official narrative. So we're going to focus on two main things today: the inconsistencies surrounding Oswald's supposed request for a lawyer named John Apt.
Okay.
And then we'll move on to the curious events surrounding the alias O.H. Lee.
Those are definitely two of the most perplexing pieces of the whole Oswald puzzle. It's incredible how these little details, when you examine them, really closely, can actually expose some cracks in the official story.
Yeah, for sure. So, to get started, let's talk about John Abbott. Did Oswald actually ask for this lawyer?
Right.
This article called John J. Apt, Did Oswald Ask for Him? By Timothy Toon really makes you think twice about that common narrative.
Well, right after the assassination, there were all kinds of sources claiming that Oswald specifically requested Apt. And Abbott was, a lawyer well known for defending communists.
Oh, wow.
And if that were true, it would kind of clear the Dallas police, right? It would make it seem like they didn't ignore Oswald's constitutional right to counsel. But when you look at Toon's research, it uncovers all these contradictions.
Really?
Like, if Oswald actually wanted Epp as his lawyer, why didn't he just come out and say it publicly during those press appearances?
That's true.
He even complained about not having a lawyer sometimes, but he never mentioned Epp.
That's so strange, especially because Oswald never seemed to shy away from speaking his mind.
Right.
And plus, Abbott himself said that he was never contacted by Oswald.
Yeah.
Or by anyone representing him.
Exactly.
So then how in the world did this whole story even get started?
So Toon traced it back to this guy named H. Louis Nichols. Nichols was president of the Dallas Bar Association at the time. And he claimed that he went to visit Oswald, and Oswald told him that he wanted App as his lawyer.
Oh, okay.
But even Nichols' story has a bunch of holes in it. Like, he insists that he went there to help Oswald get legal representation, but then he admits he didn't know anything about Abbott or even the ACLU.
Wow.
Which seems kind of strange, right? You'd think someone who's supposed to be ensuring Oswald's legal rights would know a little more about the ACLU.
Right, for sure.
And to make it even weirder, there was this other guy, Greg Olds, from the local ACLU chapter, who actually tried to see Oswald, but the police wouldn't let him in.
What?
They told him Oswald hadn't asked for a lawyer at all.
Oh, so many conflicting stories.
It's a mess. And then to add to it, according to Toon, Oswald's family never mentioned being asked to find him a lawyer either.
It doesn't add up.
Yeah.
So if Oswald didn't ask for App, then who did and why?
Right.
Was this just something made up to protect the Dallas police? Or maybe, and this is where it gets really interesting, was there a reason to try to connect Oswald to the communist cause?
That's a question worth considering because it raises some serious doubts about the official narrative. Was it just an oversight or was it something more, calculated? And if it was intentional, what else could have been manipulated?
Exactly. It makes you wonder.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does make you wonder what other information could have been, twisted or even completely made up. And speaking of made up stuff, let's move on to that second part of the deep dive request you sent in the whole O.H. Lee alias thing. This article by Jerry Rost, it brings to light some pretty curious stuff that's definitely worth a closer look.
When I first saw O.H. Lee in the request, I thought, okay, an alias. This is going to be about Oswald just trying to be sneaky and create fake identities. But when I read Rost's article, it's so much deeper than just, a name change.
For sure. One of the most interesting things Rost talks about is this slip of paper they found with the name O.H. Lee on it. It was at that boarding house where Oswald was supposedly staying. They said the handwriting was Oswald's, but Rost questions it,
Oh, really?
He says it doesn't look anything like Oswald's real handwriting from other samples.
That's strange. So then the question is, if Oswald didn't write it, who did?
Right. Was it the landlady maybe trying to cash in after the assassination by faking a document? Or was it like a deliberate attempt to frame Oswald? I mean, either way, it's wild.
Yeah, totally.
And Rost explores both of those options. But what makes this even more interesting is that he describes a bunch of incidents where someone saying they were O.H. Lee, went out of their way to be noticed, almost like they wanted to create a trail back to Oswald. Or to someone pretending to be him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's the part that really stood out to me. What kind of incidents are we talking about?
So, for example, just a few days before the assassination, there was a guy who looked like Oswald hanging out in a laundromat late at night. The cops even came and told him to leave.
Wow.
And then there's this other story about someone dropping clothes off at the dry cleaners and saying they were Oswald. But they complained about the price in a really weird way.
Okay.
And then the most interesting one, I think, is the one about this insurance salesman.
Oh, yeah. What happened with him?
Well, this salesman was visited by a guy claiming to be O.H. Lee not long before the assassination. But get this, the guy offered to show his driver's license, and it had the name Lee on it, but not Oswald.
Wait, so are we saying there was a fake Oswald running around using the name O.H. Lee?
Yeah.
If this guy had a driver's license with the name Lee, why not just use that? Why even bother with the fake name?
It's a great question, and it really points to the idea that maybe someone was trying to cause confusion on purpose about Oswald's identity.
Yeah.
But the big question is why? What would be the point?
Yeah. And how does all of this tie into the whole assassination? Was this some random thing, or was it connected to something bigger? These articles, I have to say, they raise more questions than they answer. But they are definitely intriguing.
I know. And that's the thing about looking into these historical events. You start digging, and often you end up with more questions than you started with. But those questions are what keep us curious, and ultimately what lead us to a better understanding of what really happened.
Definitely.
It's crazy to think that even now, after all this time, the Kennedy assassination is still so captivating. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's incredible. We've been exploring these lesser-known parts of Lee Harvey Oswald's life, and I'm honestly even more intrigued than I was before.
Yeah, it really speaks to just how mysterious it all is. And, as we wrap up these articles, I think it's worth going back to that televised mock trial we talked about, that article by Ross Jen, Shooting Show Trial, a review. It really shows how that event, even decades later, brought all the complexities of the Oswald case back into focus.
Yeah, it wasn't just some simple reenactment or anything. They used actual courtroom procedures. They had witnesses, evidence, closing arguments, the whole thing.
Exactly. And what's so interesting is they chose these two really high-profile lawyers to lead it. Vincent Bugliosi, the guy who prosecuted Charles Manson, he led the prosecution. His whole strategy was focused on the physical evidence, connecting Oswald to the assassination, all that stuff we've been talking about, the rifle, the bullet fragments, the eyewitness accounts.
It sounded like a pretty solid case, especially coming from someone like him. Did the defense even have a chance?
Oh, yeah, they did. Jerry Spence, a super well-known defense attorney, he represented Oswald.
Oh, yeah.
And he was brilliant. His whole approach was to cast doubt on how reliable the evidence really was and to suggest other possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, he questioned how they handled the evidence, pointed out inconsistencies in what the witnesses were saying, and he even brought in experts to challenge that magic bullet theory.
Oh, yeah, the magic bullet. That was the idea that one single bullet hit both President Kennedy and Governor Connolly, right?
Yeah.
It's always seemed a little unbelievable.
Right. Spence basically said it just wasn't possible, according to physics. And he had expert testimony to back it up. It was pretty bold considering how widely accepted that theory was, but it really showed that we still don't have all the answers about, where the bullets went and what the wounds were really like.
So we had these two legal giants going head-to-head.
Mm-hmm.
Each side made a really convincing argument. What happened in the end?
Well, the jury couldn't agree on a verdict. They were totally split. Some thought Oswald was guilty, others thought he was innocent. And I think, that just mirrors the case itself.
Yeah.
Even with all the evidence, all the testimonies, all the theories, there's no clear-cut answer.
We're all still kind of like jurors ourselves, weighing the evidence and trying to figure out this tragedy that impacted the whole world.
Yeah.
And honestly, even after all this, I still have more questions than answers.
That's what makes studying history so interesting, right? It's not about finding some easy answer or one single truth. It's about dealing with how complicated and unclear things are. It's those unanswered questions that keep us going, keep us searching for a deeper understanding.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. This deep dive has been amazing, and I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and insights with me and with our listener.
It's been great. And to our listener, I would say keep exploring this case. Keep researching, keep asking those tough questions, and keep challenging those official narratives. Maybe someday we'll all get closer to the truth.
Definitely. Keep your minds open, everyone, and thanks for joining us on the deep dive.